Hello everybody, welcome to my new build guide, which is going to be Spark Inquisitor. It's a very simple build with no crazy mechanics, it's just stack a lot of crit. It doesn't cost a lot of money to get going, and if you do start investing, you're going to notice it immediately, and this build has a very high scaling potential. However, with just a couple of exalts, you can clear the whole game. There's just few important things we have to go over because there are some guides that do not warn you, so you fall into a noob trap and you think that Spark does 0 damage. However, this just happens because people invest wrong. So let's get going with the guide and hopefully you will enjoy this build as Alright, let's get to the passive tree. So first things first, I've sorted out the tree as we level up. So starting out, we rush to retribution, increase damage, strength int, we get some life, we get some more damage, and then we get to divine judgment because it's a very strong elemental damage node. After that, we rush to reservation, but you can also first pad to the right side and take some more damage and cast speed, while cast speed is extremely important for this build. Reservation nodes, so we can start running our auras as soon as possible. Wrath and Determination will be our auras at the beginning, but if you take these nodes early, you can run 3 heralds before you get your auras. So then we get some more damage and more life. After that, we can take Elemental Overload, which every time we crit for the next 8 seconds, we get 40% more elemental damage. Our critical strikes do not deal extra damage, but 40% more at this point is much stronger than actually critting because our crit chance is not high enough. So, then we start traveling to our critical nodes. We pad to the right side. And first you grab this life cluster. After that, we switch to crit. You should be around level 60 around this area, or maybe somewhere around that. We take our crit nodes. You have nimbleness, which is a very good crit node because it gives you cast speed as well. You have one cluster here and one cluster to the left. On the master, we take 25% critical strike multiplier against unique enemies. You don't have to take this right away, you can take it when you reach maps. Then we pad down, we take Iron Wheel, so our strength damage bonus applies to spell damage as well. And since we get quite a lot of strength playing Inquisitor, especially with our Ascendancy, giving us 50 to strength and int, that's a very good node for us, grabbing some more life. After that, you're gonna see a skill tree without cluster jewels. This is how it looks like. We end up grabbing more life, of course. For our masters, we take flat life, a regen, which again synergizes with our Pious Pad. And we end up filling more of those crit nodes. Now this tree is the tree I was playing all the time before I gathered enough money to buy myself cluster jewels. And now you're gonna see my current skill tree. We respec all of that lightning damage because we do not need it anymore. And then we start building into cluster jewels. Now the cluster jewels, we need Doriani's Lesson, Overshock and Thunderstruck. You might see some people not use Thunderstruck, but I prefer it because it gives us a knockback which helps immensely against tougher rare monsters such as from Essences or Legion or Arch Nemesis League mechanic, because Spark bounces everywhere and it keeps knocking those rares back so they cannot get into melee range and actually attack you. Doriani's Lesson gives us a leech elemental damage, Overshock gives us lightning damage and increased effect of our shock. Preferably 8 passive skills, obviously. Right now, these can go from 2.5 to 3x, that's why this is a skill tree that you use at the end. For our medium clusters, we're gonna use Aerodynamics and Streamline because it gives us a bunch of projectile speed and projectile damage. And then we fill up the slots with normal jewels. So the most important stat here is crit multi and life, and then if you can get cast speed or increased damage, that's great. These are extremely cheap, these are not expensive. Again, same thing, crit multi, life, increased damage. So, very cheap thing to do is buy yourself a Watcher's Eye Prismatic Jewel from Elder, which gives 60% increased lightning damage while affected by red. These are around 20 chaos at the moment, so nothing crazy there, and it is a huge damage modifier for us. After that, rest, again, crit multi, increased maximum life. At the end, you may pick up these duration nodes, but I would take this only at the end. Another thing to say is life cluster jewel, and this can be respec as you see fit. If you feel like you're tank enough, you can go for the damage first. If you want more life, of course, spec into life and then take duration. So as I said, a simple skill tree. Now we're gonna go to ascendancies. So first lab, you're gonna take Sanctuary because you're still not crit. This gives you consecrated ground while you're stationary, and each time you stop to cast Spark, which can be even for a quarter of a second, you will get your consecrated ground going. For the next lab, people like to take Pious Pet, which is really good because it keeps your consecrated ground effect all the time to you, and it actually causes life regen, which synergizes really well with one of these masteries that gives you regenerate 2% of your life per second while moving. However, if you farm yourself an early tabula or you want to switch to crit early, for your second lab you can take your Righteous Providence and then rush to Inevitable Judgment, and for the Uber lab you can take Pious Pet, which is something I did. But as I said, I've switched to crit around level 58 or something, because Arch Nemesis allows us to get a tabula extremely easy. There's a Cicerone video that explains that, so I'm not gonna be doing that. So, gearing up this build. This is as simple as it gets. All of your rare items are just life and resistances. There's just few items that you can play with. So, or if you don't have money for Impulsa at the beginning, it's just fine. I've used Tabula and then I farmed Impulsa, but right now random 6 link bases are so cheap, you can just buy and then craft some life and resistances. Everything else is just life, res, and spell suppression. So life, res, suppress, life, res, suppress, spell damage, critical strike chance for spells, same on the helmet, suppress, life. Rings, you want to get cast speed, life, and resistances. Belt, life, resistances. Abyss Jewel, just as before, crit multi-life, and then whatever you can get. Very cheap gear, level 95, reached endgame. For your weapon, now, first things first, you want to invest into your cluster jewels before you invest into a weapon. This is probably like a 15 chaos wand. These are even cheaper. But first invest into your cluster jewels and just buy a cheap wand like this. Spell damage, lightning to spells, cast speed, critical strike chance for spells, crit multi. Nothing great there, nothing expensive there, but it gets the job done. Amulet. Ballistics, projectile speed, projectile damage for your anointment. And then again, cast speed, crit multi is probably better than crit chance at this point, and then maximum life. However, I'm still investing into other stuff, and I'm actually testing the new amulet. It is Summer Ashes of the Stars. It is good. I like it, so that's something more expensive to do. Amulet like this with cast speed, crit chance, and life is probably around 2 to 3 chaos, so, and it works fine. This is something more expensive as you invest. Now, if you start investing heavily, obviously, you want to get your elusive, you want to get Tailwind, you may want to get some of course more suppression, just better items with more resistances, and then you can start switching other items to be even more powerful because you don't need resistances on them. As I said, if you get 2 really good rings, you can put Ashes of the Stars and you don't need anything else on your amulet. But that's around that. Leveling gear, just something to recommend if you have some friends with some couple of alchemies laying around, they want to help you out. Axioms, great, I've used them probably to like level 50. Only thing I would say you should get yourself with your first alchemy drop is Karui Ward, because it's absolutely great. It gives you dexterity, which will help you with leveling up your Pierce, because you need dex. Projectile speed is just amazing, movement speed great, projectile damage is basically gives you all you need, and I've used it all up until the end, until I reached maps. Tabula, Gold Rim, Wanderlust, all of those items are great. If you can get Ilngil's Harmony when you are using Elemental Overload, that's great, because then it has no downside for you and you're critting all the time and you have your 40% more elemental damage at all times. Now, in my short video that I've made a day ago, you can see projectiles pierce additional target, shocks you inflict spread to other enemies within radius of 14. That has been achieved, maybe I have some, with your lesser Eldritch Embers and Eldritch Ichor. So basically your Embers can give you this implicit on your gloves, shocks you inflict spread to other enemies within a radius of 14 or more, which helps or synergizes with your Impulsa. But this is not something mandatory, just use whatever. First get yourself Impulsa. This base is not expensive, it's really easy to roll. And what this does is, as soon as you start throwing your Spark, it will shock the whole screen. As soon as something dies, everything is already shocked, so everything will explode. Because normal explosion from Impulsa does not inflict a new shock. However, if everything is already shocked because of your shock prolif, everything will explode. So that's something to keep in mind. Helmet, as I said, nothing special there. So that's your gear. Flasks, granite, movement speed crit, life flask, and then mana flask if you need. You can run clarity when you get more reservation, so you may not even need to use your mana flask, so you can use whatever you see fit. So yeah, that's the gear. As I said, nothing really complicated. And as you play the build, you're gonna see what you need. You may get your own ideas. Maybe you can do something. Give me some feedback. Would be great. But yeah, you can build it as you see fit. Your stats, most important stats, are crit multi and cast speed, crit chance, life, resistances. So spell suppression is something you get along the way. So when it comes to the gem setups, main setup, Spark, increased crit, Pierce, added lightning damage, increased crit damage, Inspiration. Now, if you don't like Impulsa, you can play with a normal rare armor. You can craft something with spell crit, which then you can change your increased critical strikes to something like spell echo or faster casting. Second setup, Orb of Storms, added lightning, power charge on crit, onslaught. So we have our onslaught at all times, our power charges. We use Assassin's Mark because there is no point using any elemental curse, because our ascendancy makes us ignore ally res every time we crit. Sigil of Power and faster casting. Now, movement skill, I like my Flame Dash with level 4, Arcane Surge and Second Wind. Our auras, Wrath, Determination, Defiance Banner, so bunch of armor, lightning damage. Now this slot is reserved for something you can use Clarity, but I'm gonna be using Enlighten here to improve my mana reservation even more, but you can use Clarity or Vitality, whatever you see fit, or whatever you like more. Now when you have Ashes of the Stars later on, you can start using one of them right away, and it's a good thing to do. However, right now I'm still running like this. When you level up, when you reach Act 2 and do your quests, you will be able to use your heralds, You can use all three heralds, or you can use Herald of Ice and Herald of Thunder with some banner or clarity vitality. So this was my setup after reaching the Act 2. 2 heralds, clarity, vitality, and because, as I said, I do rush for reservation nodes, you can run all of that and you'll be just fine with your mana. And we help Alira, so it's a massive mana region, you never run out of it. Another thing to mention is 15 to all elemental resistances, with Alira giving us 15 to all elemental resistances is absolutely amazing. So yeah, that's your gem setup. Alrighty, I think that's it. So thank you for watching my guide. I hope you enjoyed this build as much as I do. I'm gonna keep playing it for a bit now. I'm gonna invest even more to see how far it can go. If you have some questions, post it in the comments. I'll be more than happy to answer. And if you have an idea on how to improve this build, I'm always happy to take an advice or learn something new. So yeah, have a good one. Hello everybody. Today I'm just gonna quickly show you something I've noticed when I was gearing up this character. And I was looking at the new mods. I realized that now with a lesser Eldritch Ember or higher runs, you can get this modifier, which